It is Onam season here in Kerala. So happy Onam to everybody. Last year there was one unfortunate incident which happened in Bangalore. Some children had made the poo column in the foyer of a residential complex. And some lady there, she didn't like that particular foyer being used in that manner. So she stomped all over that decoration. And it was rather silly and pretty despicable act. And the entire internet erupted in a lot of anger and protest. And when I saw that incident, I kind of realized that how space has meaning, different meaning for different people. The children thought that was a nice place for the foyer, which is understandable. It is usually accepted, but that particular lady didn't accept it in that manner. The reasons I do not know, and that is not the point of this talk. Uh, there is this specialization in architecture called environment behavior, and that particular specialization actually uh, connects between the environment, especially the built environment, and our behaviors, such as the one which was seen last year. And it's a pretty important subject because unless and until an architect is really sensitized to how people may be enticed to behave in a particular way, we often don't even think about it. I had another uh, experience which was a lot more nuanced than that horrible one last year. I had just returned back from IIT Kharagpur after I graduated, and I was actually on that journey from the railway station back to my house. I'd caught one double decker bus, and I was sitting on the top of the bus. It's a lovely monsoon time, it was. And it had just rained. The bus had come to a halt near a traffic light, and across the uh, road I could see, across from the edge of the road where I was halted, I could see a pavement, and behind the pavement was a compound wall of some building over there. And on that compound wall, on a couple of nails, this one bag of, not bag, a kind of a hammock of clothes, made of clothes. And inside the hammock, I was at the top, right? So I could see inside the hammock. There was a small baby who was fast asleep. In front of that particular hammock, one lady was sweeping the pavement and she was kind of tidying it up. And possibly because she perceived that space to be her house, she was a pavement dweller over there. And there were some other scattered articles here and there in that place. And that compound wall had some kind of a shade, so the baby was protected from the rain and all that. Now, when she was doing that, one person walked across that space, and it had just rained, right? So it muddied that particular pavement. And that lady, she got so annoyed, she started screaming at that guy. And that guy was wondering, I don't know what hit me. Why should you get angry with me? What did I do wrong? And from his point of view, it was just a pavement. But from her point of view, it was her house, a tiny little space, and her child was also there. So I started reflecting on these kind of things, and I noticed these kind of usage of space. And I think it is very critical that when one is designing, one has to start imagining what kind of triggers may be there in those spaces. Uh, in our college, environment behavior is never taught, usually never taught. It is taught, unfortunately, as a specialization, as a MArch subject in some colleges. I was little fortunate when I was in IIT. I was very fortunate to meet Dr. John T. Lang. He was on a sabbatical and he had come to IIT Kharagpur to spend some time there, and he was writing some book and all that. He's quite a uh, kind authority in this particular specialization in architecture. And he used to conduct a few lectures, and those days we were discussing these kind of books which was there in the library. And it's a very vast subject, so I cannot really tell you all about it. But what happened in both these incidents is there's a concept called territoriality, that as an organism, as an animal, we establish territories. I mean, many animals do that. Some animals do that by leaving certain scents and from their glands or urine or something like that. Humans also leave very subtle cues which kind of establishes their territory in the minds of others. But occasionally there would be conflicts where one group of people or one person may not recognize the other person's territory, and there will be some kind of conflict. The unfortunate situation is that when we design, we don't really think along these lines, that there are separate territories and which is actually going to happen, and it's not just one space. The same space can behave as different territories by different people based on their behavior and their psychology. And it is quite a challenging job, and it's not just about one individual establishing a territory. There will be groups of people who can establish territories and perceive those territories which others may not or may perceive it. So it's pretty intricate, and it's not just territoriality. Environment behavior covers many other topics also, and it's worth chasing up. Actually, if somebody's interested, you should really read up about it, that how does environment affect behavior, and how does behavior in turn goes around changing the environment. So the reason for telling this is that when we start thinking about our design, and then we start exercising our creativity and start working out various options. In my previous video, I was talking about that it's important to do abductive reasoning so that we have multiple alternatives, and then we assess and choose the one which we want to really go ahead with, and then uh, take it for execution. So, while assessing those alternatives, one of the crucial things which really needs to be understood would be this presence of such territories, which may not always map similarly to the space. So, we may have a room, and the room itself may not be perceived as just one room, but it could be perceived in different parts, may mean different territories. It all depends on how the project is. And it also depends on who the person is or the group of people are who are establishing these territories. So, this plurality of territories which can exist in the same space is something which actually can be a very important part of the experience of architecture when it is designed there. And that experience, we need to somehow try to really reason out and hopefully predict to some extent, to some reasonable extent. And there are means to do that. But there is one problem there. Right across our entire education, we've never been really told to think in these terms. We've been told about how to make the form of the building and the elevations and sections, and in all that hurry we actually forget real human concerns, which can make or break a particular project. And in the absence of not being able to really, even identify spaces in a very neutral and very objective manner, uh, what we do is that we fantasize, and we just think of that this is how they will use that space. I've seen a lot of architects saying that, okay, this is how they will experience it, and they will have this wonderful feeling there. And this is how a lot of students also, they fall into the trap. A lot of young teachers fall into this trap, and I am wondering what is the justification for that particular fantasy which an architect is weaving on that drawing of that particular project. One famous example of this fantasy, which resulted in quite a tragedy. In fact, Charles Jenks, in his book refers to that project as the death knell. That's that point at which modernism died. That's his book, The Language of Postmodern Architecture. And that happened in Pruitigo, or Pruitigo, I don't know how to pronounce it, in St. Louis in USA, where they floated a competition, an international competition. It was a very vast housing project, and it was won by Minoru Yamasaki from Japan. And when you look at the competition drawings, they seem to really convince at least that architect who submitted those drawings that it's a very nice, wonderful place. It had sketches of young mothers with their prams and little children on their bicycles and balloons in the air, and a lot of happiness was being described in those sketched out 1 point and 2 point perspectives. But what really happened, unfortunately, is when that project was completed and people moved in, there was complete bad behavior, to put it very bluntly. There were people with switchblades hiding in the corridors to attack people over there. The lifts were used as toilets, and ladies were getting molested, and all kinds of chaos happened in that particular project. And it went on to such an extent that people said that we don't want to stay there, and they just moved out. And then that particular project is a huge housing complex with a lot of buildings. That project was just lying there with nobody using that those buildings. Nobody wanted to come there to stay there. And it's the same architect. Unfortunately, his other project also had a problem, which was not his. He didn't create that problem, which was the World Trade Center. We all know what happened to that. And in this project, unfortunately, nobody was staying there, so they just demolished it. So that architect had two explosions, which was a very unfortunate kind of history for that architect. So what happens is that if we are not uh, having some mechanism to really identify these territories, or at least identify the spaces, we are ending up with fantasies about what may happen to that project. So even if you are using abductive reasoning, and but if you have not identified the spaces, you are going to be in quite a soup sometimes. If you're lucky, you may not be. But if you're unlucky, what you had predicted that this is how the spaces would be used and this is how the territories would get established, that may go out of the window and you may be facing some serious problems. So that's one of the reasons why I, in spite of a lot of what you may say, people look at my software and kind of, I mean, what is this architect writing software and all that? The one of the reasons why I am still going gung ho on my own software is because it allows me to talk both about spaces as well as built matter. So what I mean by talking about spaces is not some verbal talk, but the model made in TAD, it is able to identify and very neutrally tell others who are going to use that model that, see, these are the spaces in this particular project, and now we have some firm material on which we can conduct discussions. And that is how you can actually start arguing very cogently and start eliminating the various alternatives which didn't fit in with all the criteria which you wanted, and then take the one which you really want to go ahead with. So, thank you very much for listening. I hope to see you next time. Thank you.